Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Refold Roundtable podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things language learning. And this week, we have a special guest with us. He just reached level 4 on the Refold roadmap, and he's one of Refold's first coaching graduates. So we're going to be talking with Ryan, aka Nerdydude, this week, and we're all really excited. But before we get into introducing Ryan, I want to introduce my co-hosts. I am Bree. I am the social media person for Refold, and I'm here with Gorg. Gorg, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Gorg or George, and I am the community manager for Refold, and I like languages.
And we also have Shiki with us. Shiki, do your thing.
Every time.
I know, I have to come up with a weird way for you to introduce
It
yourself.
keeps me on my toes. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
I'm Shiki, admin of the Japanese server, stage 2C Japanese learner, and I am a language coach for Refold, and I coached Mr. Nerdydude himself.
Yeah, and so our special guest, like I said earlier, is Ryan, aka Nerdydude. If you have been anywhere in the Refold Discord network, I'm sure you've seen him around. He's very active in the Japanese server, a staple of the community, if you will. And Ryan, welcome to the podcast. Would you like to? I already introduced you, but would you also like to introduce yourself for people who might not know you?
Indeed. But first, disembodied electronic server denizens, you who listen to us, thank you. May your day or time of night be merry and receive endless appropriate hugs. My name is Ryan. I am also go by Nerdydude. I am on the Japanese server mostly, but I've been poking around in Central on the Chinese server as well. I have recently ascended to stage 4, but not without significant help, which I am exceptionally grateful for from the Refold coaching program. I have also, as of today, so you heard it here first, ascended to 2A in Chinese.
I love that the ascension vocabulary. I feel like we need to just adopt that.
The Ascension, it's his thing.
I love it.
He's got a special GIF on the Refold
Yes.
Japanese
There
server.
is?
The
A
engine
GIF
of
that I
Ascension.
made. The
You make
Yes.
can you
engine
like tag
of
me in it?
Ascension.
First of
I will
all, it's GIF, Gorg. And second of
GIF,
all, I need to see this
like the
GIF.
peanut
I will
butter.
fight you.
Oh
I
my
will
No,
god.
fight
not
you
like
to
the
the end
peanut
of the
butter.
earth.
It's GIF.
It's GIF.
We're gonna get canceled for this. Oh man, already we're
You're
getting canceled in
outnumbered
this
here, Gorg.
And
episode.
yes, he is a fan of the vocabulary, the
Yes.
terminology around that,
Love it.
referring to it as ascending and ascension. So the
Yes,
engine of
so
ascension.
the engine of Ascension is an institution which I brought into being on the Japanese Discord server because those denizens find themselves ever so down on themselves. They do not appreciate and understand their own progress, so I took it upon myself to have lots of fun by
I do always
creating.
say that trying to get a Japanese learner to take a compliment is like pulling teeth.
Yes. So Bree and anybody else, I would encourage you
Yeah.
to go to the Wins channel in the Japanese server, and you will find what I like to call Ascension notices,
Love
where
that.
I lay it
You
on
know,
the
as community manager, I try to popularize the wins. Um,
Yeah.
and we did it a few times. We talked about it in the community newsletter. I think we even made a video. And some people
Mhm.
were like not happy with it. They felt like
Really.
their privacy was being violated. And it's a weird situation with the wins because like I want to support people and I want to share it, but some people don't want that. And when you're dealing
Mhm.
with a server of 20,000 people and lots of different wins, lots of people ascending, it can be
Mhm.
difficult to like double check with
Yeah.
every single person that they're okay with it. So
Yep.
I love the wins, but if you post in the wins channel, please do not be shy. We are happy to support you, and we love it.
Oh
And
yes.
yeah, don't be shy.
I
Some
always
people are
feel
really
I
really
shy.
find
motivated
them.
looking at the
I
wins.
find those wins, and I celebrate them with all
Can
effort.
confirm.
It's all
Now,
effort. I
now
think this is
Ryan.
season
So,
1. I spent
so
like an
I heard.
hour writing. I spent like an hour writing this for one of our community members who ascended to stage 4 just a
Wow,
while
Oh,
I'm
back.
gonna go
wow.
look. So
And
I
I
heard
and I
Ryan that you
end
have
everything off with the engine of ascension.
love that. So
Now,
I heard that you
Ryan.
have an interesting story with Japanese.
Yes, I want to get into your story. So, Ryan, you have been learning for how long? Almost 2 decades, right?
Yes. So
So, give us your backstory.
We need the
if you
lore.
were to
Yeah, I want some lore.
rewind, yes, it is time for the lore. So mukashi mukashi. Wait, I will rewind that. If we were to rewind the circumambulations of our sun 18 times around Seoul, you would find me at age 14 in Minnesota, um, in my high school, signing up for my first Japanese class with some friends. And this was just after I had moved here and made some friends. And we all decided that, oh, wouldn't it just be fun to take Japanese class? Long time ago now. And so I went and took Japanese 101 and 2 at my high school. And I have been a self-directed learner really ever since. Um, Going really kind of back and forth on lots and lots of different things. I did Genki, I worked through it, I did every exercise, and I even went so far as to all of the writing exercises, all of the vocabulary. I went and I found their kanji representations, and I wrote those in the books instead of the phonetics, instead of the syllabics, instead of the kana. So kind of off and on. I like to say that I've been engaged with the Japanese language for 18 years. That does not mean that I've been actively working on it for that long. Life happens,
And that is
things happen.
common.
Mm-hmm.
You're not
Mm-hmm.
alone there. I
Mm-hmm.
always tell people, especially new clients for Refold coaching or just people in the community, that languages will be there. For most people learning a language, they're not learning a language that's going to be going extinct in the next decade.
Mm-hmm.
So life happens. You change careers, you pick up school, you get sick, people in your family get sick. It
Mm-hmm.
happens. We don't always
100%.
have perfect control over our environment, and the time that we dedicate is finite. And sometimes we have to spend that time elsewhere.
Yes. And that is absolutely there. So I just want to make sure that any denizens listening to this do know fully that life happens and it's okay. So for me, there was definitely some periods of sleep there, but there was also a period where I was living in Japan. Um, and there, I went and worked myself up to an N2, certified in the Japanese language, and then have been kind of vibing, doing lots of different things. But interestingly enough, in a kind of a weird like language learner hermit sort of way, I wasn't really involved in Refold and even a broader like language learning community until about like a year and a half ago or so, when I joined the Refold Discord. So like the Refold Japanese server was my first like concrete actual community of Japanese learners that I started interacting with on a regular basis. And I did a lot of weird stuff in my time as a hermit when I was learning Japanese by myself.
That's common. I think it can be very lonely to learn a language. Um, you see it a lot, even with people in the community. We spend a
Mm-hmm.
lot of time doing textbooks by ourselves, or hopefully doing immersion by ourselves. And it
Mm-hmm.
can be a lonely road
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
I definitely can.
And people in your life do not get it. I know that you have listened to every episode of the podcast, and I know that you have heard us talk about how people in our lives do not understand, people who are not acquainted with acquiring a second language.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get it. So it can be very isolating for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely can. Uh, Definitely can be. Um, there's lots of different degrees and stuff like that, and especially like in my case, like a lot of because life happens and Japanese is hard. Um, and a lot of people kind of just stopped. Like I'm the only one left out of my high school friends that were learning this with any degree of vigor. Um, but I am thankful for my family. They do support this, even if they're not language learners themselves. So I definitely want to give a shout out there. They are supportive, and I love them. Um, but yeah, it was interesting because what ended up happening with me is I just kind of ended up spinning around, like thinking I was doing things and not sure what was working, not sure what was not, and really had no benchmark or anything to understand where I was going. And it was interesting. It was a lot. It felt like I was spinning. In a way, it felt like I was spinning my wheels for a while. And I even got really down deep into kind of the bowels of custom SRS programming because I figured out, okay, Anki is written in Python. It has a module on PyPy. So there was a time where I was extracting the Anki database and running calculations on top of that, and isolating out which cards I had a high probability of forgetting based upon my history with them, and then like pre-reviewing them before I would actually study, and then writing memnotics and stuff like that. And right before I refold, I wrote a bunch of custom scripts to like pull down the entire Japanese uh, synonym and antonym dictionary and make flashcards from them.
That is a
Like
common thing. I've done it myself. I had a friend scrape a big dictionary for Filipino,
mhm,
and
mhm.
I was like, I am going to Anki all 60,000 of these definitions. I did not do that. I gave up because that's not practical. But I
Sounds
think that,
insane.
yeah, I think that that thought occurs to a lot of immersion learners because we see Anki is so powerful, and it's really hard to
Yes.
drop that and get back into like, no, we need to just interact with the language, not make flashcards too much.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that
that's
is
an
true.
interesting thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got
Yeah, I'm
some
just
tech
not
knowledge.
gonna do that.
So, what is your background beyond being a language learner, beyond being the train guy, beyond being a helper on the Japanese server, sort of like a mini moderator for those who are
Mhm.
not in the Refold Discord servers? Uh, what is your background? Are you a data engineer or a data scientist? I always mix those two up.
So happy to comment on that. So I am in data, and my title is a data engineer. So here's how the way that I like to think about it. Um, Data is adjacent to software engineering. Uh, but so in some cases we can think about a lot of the same practices, we can think a lot of the same ways of doing things, but we are focused on doing different things. We're focused on working with information, not necessarily designing applications. And if you think about the terms that you mentioned, data scientist versus a data engineer is someone that um, moves, organizes, and models data. And this can be anything from pulling information from a database. It can mean organizing that information into tables, joining it with other pieces of information, organizing things based on knowledge domains that typically within a business context, uh, like companies are really into this kind of thing. Um, but that's kind of what I do. It's the easiest way for me to describe this is that I'm someone that moves and organizes information that's stored in different pieces. Uh, and stored in different, a data scientist is someone that runs things like forecasting models, machine learning models, on
Got you.
information to
And
achieve something
that
result. Like
is what Joshua
yes,
does here at
yes,
Refold.
yes.
He's a data
So,
scientist, and that's why you guys bonded
definitely.
because you guys complement each other. He can do the modeling, and then you can move the stuff and put it where it needs to go.
Yes. Move the stuff, organize it, right? Stuff that gets fed into that. There's actually a whole thing about the data engineering life cycle. This is definitely different from language learning, but I'll just wrap this up here briefly, where data science is one of the use cases that we think about that's comes out of this. Another one is visualization. This is making data pretty. Shiki, I know we've had several conversations about kind of data and stuff in general, and this is kind of where you're more into. I've had some experience with that as well. I was basically a data visualization guy for a couple of years, and at a prior role, I was the guy that did everything for this. And actually, when I came home from Japan, um, I was a supply chain analyst and I was doing all of these roles, but I was still keeping Japanese alive, even though I was sleeping, because I had my little notebook of my to-do lists, and I would organize everything it was my to-do list for doing, done, and started, and I would write all of those words in Japanese, just to keep a little bit of those things fresh.
So you mentioned that you're a survivor. 18 years ago, you and a band of your most glorious friends, right?
Hmm.
You banded together to learn Japanese. What has kept you going for 18 years? That is dedication. I cannot think of many things that I have done beyond eating, drinking, uh, for 18 years straight. Well, off and on. Uh, what has driven you, if I can ask, to acquire Japanese?
It's simply at base. It's simply that I want to. That Japanese is an incredibly beautiful language. It's very different from my own. It has lots of great content. Um, but there was always just something that, like, from like the moment I walked into class, where I'm like, I am going to take this as far as I possibly can, and it has become a fundamental piece of who I am. When people around me think about it, they're like, "Oh, he's the guy that is just into that and just is taking that forward."
All right. Well, now going back to learning, how was it? Like, how was coaching? What was the coaching process like? So you're unique, Ryan,
Mhm.
in that you were one of the first clients that Vanessa did without me. I trained Vanessa since I was
Mhm.
the first full-time Refold employee. And you were one of the first where I wasn't there. I didn't attend a single meeting of yours over the 13 or 12 weeks, however long your coaching program was.
Mhm.
Tell us about it. And I think your glorious coach who helped you ascend, the Honorable Vanessa, is here with us, right? You still there, Vanessa?
Yes.
I am listening, especially
Okay.
now.
Hi. Yeah.
Yes.
Tell
Yes. Yes.
us
Yes. Because it's
about it.
about.
Tell us about
So,
it. 'Cause you were also one of our first, I think, advanced learners doing
mhm,
the stage 3, stage 4 transition.
mhm,
So I
mhm,
think I'm
mhm.
curious.
Okay. So words cannot describe how grateful I am for Vanessa. And Ethan was there a few times as well, so I'm very grateful for him. But it was really Vanessa who was there with me every single week, and I cannot thank her enough. I really can't. Um, uh, we've had lots of interactions way before uh, I was a coaching client, just through the time of interacting with each other with the Discord server, um, and I'm very grateful. So for those listening who may be thinking or talking about coaching, okay, so here is something that I think is interesting to consider. That just regarding to my story and my timeline, um, is that yes, I have this 18 years of exposure, uh, but a significant issue that I faced was, well, there were two issues that I faced. One was kind of an executive functioning thing of where do I go? What do I start? What do I do? And being kind of on my own like I didn't, and not having, and being kind of a loner as it were for the time that I didn't have a lot of people to kind of bounce ideas off of. and I didn't have much of a structure. So Vanessa really provided, and the coaching program of Refold really provided that structure for a defined period of time, not like a year. Like I was thinking in terms of my Japanese journey before I really joined Refold, that it was going to be like a year for every single milestone, and it was a 12-week process with coaching, and so it was it was much more structured, much more focused, and that really provided me the rails, as it were, to really move things forward. And then the kind of distilled push that coaching provided, that Vanessa provided, to just do the work. I mentioned this in my testimonial video for the Refold coaching, because I recorded one. It's up on the website. Um, that it's all about doing the work, really kind of showing up and doing this. And through the coaching process, really helped me see that. I tracked my time for the first time, and that was really a game changer for me, because just to see that, oh wait, I actually do spend this time, and it actually is in the bank, and it is actually done, and I understood really like how much time I actually do have and I can actually dedicate to this, and then shifting my metrics to the time that I spend and the activities that I'm doing and the activities that I
Now,
know
this
that
is
I'm
a
doing.
good point. So,
Mhm.
I know a little bit about your coaching process because I lead two
Mhm.
meetings. I lead a meeting on Monday and a meeting on Friday, and I check in on all the coaching clients with all the different
Mhm.
coaches and see how clients are doing. And one thing that was surprising to me was that for 18 years you were not a time tracker. You didn't track your time. You weren't
No.
interested. And Vanessa told me in a meeting that once you started time tracking, you got really into it. Is that right, Vanessa? You said it was like a light went on in his head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it makes sense because I had a similar experience when I first started doing Japanese, like a year and a half ago. For the first month when I started immersing, I didn't do the whole time tracking thing because it wasn't something that really crossed my mind until somebody mentioned it in the server, and I was like, "Huh, maybe I should try that." But yeah, for the first month, I didn't do any kind of time tracking or anything like that. And I was thinking to myself, "Oh yeah, I'm spending all day on Japanese. This is great." And then when I started actually tracking my time after, the second or third month of immersion learning, I discovered I was only spending an hour or 2 hours actually getting Japanese input, and I was like, "Ah, well, crap."
And I think that's a common thing among all of the clients I've seen. Um, we're at over 20 now, I think, in the past nine
Mhm,
months of coaching.
Mhm.
People overestimate the amount of time they spend doing activities related to language
mhm,
learning.
Oh, I'd even
And
say overestimating in general, right? You don't know how much you're spending, or underestimating. It's impossible to know if it's not tracked. And for me, the reason I got into it is I could see it was something that was actually in the bank. Now, I don't know about other communities, but I see this in the Japanese community all the time, where everybody's like, I don't know if I'm getting any good. I don't know what's happening. This, and for me, I noticed what really, really helped was that time tracking, was seeing that, oh, I actually am putting in this time. It's categorized, and I know it's against specifically the goals that we've discussed. So I know I'm winning. I know I'm getting good. And an additional kind of thing that I noticed, which I really came to kind of come to terms with in a good way, I think, and this I think will be really helpful for other Japanese learners, but learners in general, is that that my progress was imperceptible to me as a learner. Um, like, am I getting good? Am I getting better? Your memory of words, your memory of flashcards may not actually, for me at least, mean that you're getting better or getting worse. It's that doesn't actually, in my mind, I think, tie as much, because what I did notice was, oh, I've watched Terrace House for the first time. Oh, I've you know, got my I've started writing Japanese more than the first time I did, like, 18 years ago when I kept or 17, it was 18 years ago now, when I kept a journal in Japanese over the summer in between Japanese 1 and Japanese 2.
I like
Where I wrote,
how you said it's something that people come to terms with, that as long as they show up every day and do the thing, they will make progress, because that's something that a lot of immersion learners struggle with is, like you said, the progress is imperceptible unless you're going back and rewatching things on a regular basis or something like that. But as long as you keep showing up and doing the things every day, you will make progress. Like, it's impossible not to. It's inevitable.
your ascent, or should I, or as I should say, and as I say in the Japanese server, your ascension is secure.
Yeah.
Because it's working with your brain, right? Your brain is not shut off. If you're paying attention, your brain is engaged in the process, and it's literally what we all did for our native language. I know internalization is something we've discussed, but it's something we've all already done.
Mhm.
So for me, kind of coaching really shifted my perspective to, I have specific concrete tasks. I have a specific number of hours that I'm going to do, and I win by checking that off every single day. Every single day I can. And of course, life happened. There were times where weeks were leaner, and other weeks where weeks were fatter in terms of my time spent in the Japanese learning process. But I think overall, like, what was my total hours that we had clocked in for the 12-week
I
period?
can take a look actually right now.
Because
All
it
right.
was quite a few.
It was a
Well,
lot.
Vanessa is taking a peep at your hours that you've tracked. My question is, you mentioned checking things off. Does that mean that you were a fan of sort of the habit formation and the habit
Yes,
tracker and like physically
yes,
checking the box?
I had a habit. As a Refold client, you get these videos to start out with, and they recommend a habit tracker app. And I had a habit tracker app. I still have the app, and I would
Are you
literally
still
check
checking off those boxes every day?
some of them. I am graduated, so I've been kind of focusing on something else right now, this exact moment. But I do check a few of them off as I kind of work through things. But definitely while I was in the program, I was checking things off every single day, like to cover the activities that were covered in the program.
So I finished looking, and overall time spent with Japanese for the program was over 300 hours. And
Wow.
if I just add up the raw input time, like if I subtract Anki time and output activities and things like that, the raw input time was over 200 hours.
So that's like 12 out, or that's what, 25 hours a week over 12 weeks,
Mhm.
$3 roughly. That's a
Yeah.
lot of time. Like 25 hours a week is it's like a part-time job.
Yeah,
It was,
exactly.
and it confirmed to me really that I actually do have time to do this. Like, this is legit a thing that I can fit and I can make this happen. And that's what time tracking really did for me. So I just want to kind of really hone in here on the identity piece. Okay, so we mentioned habit tracking, we mentioned time tracking. All of those things don't tie with how many words do I remember exactly at this moment, or can I output a specific word in a specific domain right now? Those were not the relevant questions for me. The relevant questions for me, am I being the person that is showing up to do this Japanese learning every single day? And am I tracking these habits and proving that? Am I spending this time? And I was.
So it's
And
mindset.
it's mindset and identity that matter more in this. And I think that's ultimately generalizable to a lot of different skills, a lot of different things, really. Um, because there's things that we do in our lives that we want to do and that we want to get better at, or we want to just continue doing. Um, and it's and over the long term, things add up. You get things add up. You build something, and the repetitions of doing that get you farther. The analogy I like to make is the pistons of a steam engine, right? How a steam engine moves is the steam pushes an actual piston in the front of the engine, and these rods are connected to these very big wheels, and these rods make the identical motion with every single revolution, but the engine itself moves inevitably forward because those wheels are being turned by those repetitive motions. And in that same way, the repetition of the application for the skill moves us forward.
I love that because um coaching, I think it was over 20 clients that George mentioned was the number. Um
It's over. We just went public with it. So we had
mhm.
2 cohorts, before we went public as we were refining the program, and I think we have 23 before we went public. So
Mhm.
it's quite a few
Ooh,
people who've
wow.
been through the program.
Yeah. And a common trend with a lot of them is that, um there's a there's various issues that they come to us for specifically. But one of them is this feeling like they're too busy. And I've also noticed this on the Japanese server specifically. There are a lot of people who think, oh, I'm too busy. And for most people, it's not really true. And they think because they're too busy, they don't even want to bother putting in the
It's a
effort
time
to
management
do a
thing.
little bit.
People just again, it goes back to not being aware of how you
Hmm.
spend your
Mm.
time unless you're actually tracking it.
Yeah. But like Ryan
Ethan
says, if you're spinning your wheels every day, inevitably you do move forward.
Correct, and Ethan gives this example of when he was younger and he was going really hardcore on coding. He would wear like a timer on his neck and like literally time every single thing he did. And
I've
out of
actually thought
those
of doing that,
out of those
something like that.
23, however many clients, over 20, I've only seen one who was legitimately too busy.
Yes. Only
Um,
one.
only one. One client is very dedicated to other things and really truly only had about an hour a day. Like really. Uh, some people are into like pro sports, competing, traveling, and training can take up a lot of time. So out of those 20 some odd clients, I've only seen one who legitimately was too busy, or rather, as busy as they thought they were.
Yeah. So
Um,
99% of people, you are not too busy.
it's more about, in my mind, really getting comfortable. Getting comfortable, finding a rhythm that works for you, finding a schedule that works for you, and then just literally doing the same thing, doing the same process every day. I got into a rhythm. I'm a little bit more of a uh, uh, that might have to get edited out. I don't know. Um, do we do this live, or am I breaking like the fourth wall
It
at this
is
point?
not. It is not live.
You're allowed to
Okay,
break the fourth wall. It's fine.
okay, that, because I lost my train of thought.
You looked at the
Well,
message that I sent asking other people, and it totally distracted you. I think is what
Yes,
happened.
that is
no,
actually
I cannot hear the hammer.
okay. I hear
Um,
the hammering.
All
how
right. Well,
about
I did not realize it would derail Nerdy to use a train.
Kaboom, kaboom. Which I
um
mean, but those phrases are actually fairly natural in American English, despite the fact that passenger rail hasn't been much of a thing here for since the 70s.
Taking it back, let's switch gears. There's more to be said about coaching. There's always more.
Or
And
back
I
the train
do,
off the siding and onto the main line.
I do want to hear about how the time you told me a story about like when Ethan looked you in the eye and said, Ryan, you're stage 4. You're better than you think you are. You've leveled up. You're ready. But before we get into that, tell us about trains. Why do you like trains so much?
Uh, well, how shall I describe them? I mean, the easiest way to say is that they're big and they're beautiful. But
A lot of things are big and beautiful.
I'm not quite sure what to say to that, honestly.
We're keeping
But
that in,
trains
Ben. Keep that in.
specifically. Trains specifically.
So, so
Oh, Lord.
I mean, I grew up with Thomas the Tank Engine. My mom took me when we were living in Colorado. Took me to the Georgetown Loop. It's a heritage mining railway with an engine from 1911, I do believe. Took me out there, and it was just a wonderful experience. And then I've always just been really fascinated and loved the aesthetic. Um, and then once I had some experience in Japan, I visited in 2009. I came and I lived in Japan for a couple of years. Really got to ride and explore that. And it's just a lifelong love. It's just love the aesthetic, love everything. My profile picture, it's my favorite Japanese steam engine. It's a Japanese D51. Um, this is kind of Japan's national steam engine. Like if you talk to a Japanese person, they think of a steam engine, they'll think of a D51. This actually appeared, and if you ever played the game Zelda Spirit Tracks, it was a optional extra engine that you could get because in that game you were Legend of Zelda, but you were literally a train conductor. You would go around on a train, and it was the best thing ever. Um, Back then. So both like kind of the beauty of the machinery, there's a connection with history, especially on the Steam side of things, and then a unique mode of travel for those who have more developed rail infrastructure. It's kind of unique for me because in North America, passenger rail infrastructure isn't that much of a thing. At least hasn't been in America since the 1970s. You can still take Amtrak from place to place, but the infrastructure is not nearly as there as it was. Um, but
There's a lot of
traveling on
unfortunate
Japanese.
archaic
Hmm.
laws around passenger rail
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
America. One thing that's
Hmm.
highly limiting is speed limits.
Hmm.
Um, I think passenger rails in America are limited like something absurdly low. How what is it in miles per hour? Do you know off the top of your head, Ryan? Like
I
30
can't
miles an
remember
hour?
exactly, but like freight goes about 30. Freight goes
And
about 30
I
miles an
think
hour.
passenger rails are limited by those same laws to go about 30, which is pretty slow compared to like a bullet train in Japan.
Yeah, I mean there's infrastructure. There's a lot of infrastructure considerations at that point, because you need different signaling, you need different grades, like how steep the rails are, the types of curves you can have, etc. So it's definitely an infrastructure problem. Um, there is a few interesting projects. There's a outfit out of Texas that is that's actually buying Japanese train sets to build a connection, I believe, from Dallas and Houston. There is in your home state, Vanessa. There is All Aboard Florida, the first passenger rail project in America in 80 years.
Oh,
Um,
really?
Oh,
so they have higher speed rail. Oh, it was no, it's Oliver Ford. It's now Brightline. It's called Brightline. It's actually bought by Virgin, so it's like technically Virgin trains now. Um, but yeah, so the trains is just something that I love. They're just
hey,
beautiful,
that's
and
okay.
and
A lot of people have their interests. We've brought Pete on, also known as Doviende. He's a very old school language learner. He's
Mhm.
met a lot of polyglots. He used to be very
Mhm.
active on howtolearnanylanguage.com, the forum. And,
Mhm.
he's met Steve Kaufman. He's been,
Wow,
all over. And he's a birder. And he talks about birds the same way that you talk about trains. So,
that's so fun. That's so fun. That's so fun. And Japanese trains and like being on a train in Japan is like my happy place.
very cool. I don't know the last time I took a train that wasn't a subway.
Hmm.
If I ever have, I may not have. So cool. Well, I
Yeah,
did want to ask about
subways
trains.
count. Subways count. Subways
And
count. They're trains too.
What is your favorite train fact?
So, what I would think is what comes to mind, I think is the spiciest. We actually have some a spicy fact here.
There are
Is
spicy train facts.
there there are actually more. Yeah, there are quite a few of them, especially if you delving back into like
Oh.
the 19th century rail. Well, there's like a few. Like there's one is the fact that companies building out in the American West were paid by the mile, so it like had absolutely the wrong incentive. So these people just built these lines that just like snaked around everywhere. So like you think about the Transcontinental Railroad, they're putting down the Golden Spike, and they're building this thing. Like that area was so badly located that they had to move it like a century later. So that's one spicy train fact. Here's another spicy train fact about Japanese rail, that
I'm here for it.
the reportedly the manager of the project in the 60s, I do believe, when they were building the line between Tokyo and Osaka, the first one would become the Tokaido Shinkansen. He deliberately underestimated the cost of the project by half so that it would get approved. And
So
it was all
Wow.
he
government rail.
lied
So
about the cost.
he understated it by like half
On
and had to
purpose?
on purpose
Oh
so
my
that
goodness.
it would get approved, because infrastructure projects unfortunately are known for their cost overruns. So yeah, he literally just, yeah, that's how I understand the story. I could be wrong on that one, but that's what I understand happened. So he had to like step down midway through the project, but they were already starting building this, and it was getting ready for the Olympics. And so like, well, you can't just like not show off your beautiful new infrastructure. Um, so they ended up finishing it.
Cool. Are
Well,
there? Well, I can actually. This is not a train podcast. I was about to ask: Are there
I was gonna
any? Are
say,
there any tracks that were like left uncompleted, like that got too expensive and they just cut their losses? But I'm not going to ask that because this is a
no.
language learning podcast. I could talk about, because actually I don't know much about trains. Like I'm actually legitimately interested
George is over
in.
here like kindling the foundation of a new hobby, like as we speak.
mm-hmm,
Yes, I'm
He's
going to be a train guy. You're
mm-hmm.
either a
why
plane
not?
guy or a train guy, and I have
Come
chosen
right,
train.
come ride with me, George. It's okay.
Come ride with me. Well, you cut him off. I want to hear about their transition into stage 4. So before coaching, what refold stage were you?
That's a really interesting subject. So, and
I'm here for it.
I can lay this back a little bit more with my story of,
Okay.
I actually found out about immersion learning reading the AJAT website when Kazumoto was still active
Mm.
So
in
Okay,
that's
so
like,
you're
2012,
go way
in
back. Okay.
2013, and I was in Japan. I was living there. I was an English teacher. I was an ALT. So, uh, but I ended up getting just so intimidated, and the executive functioning things required with that to like make your own process
Yes.
was very, very difficult. I did end up, through a recommendation of a friend, doing RTK, and I love it. And I still to this day will appreciate RTK. I know it's no longer Refold advice, so Vanessa, don't hate me. But
I gave you permission to love RTK. That's totally fine.
but I did do it the first time, and I found an SRS. I did not use Anki. I used a alternative available for iOS. And I just ended up like, I didn't even know it
what
at
was
the
the
time, but
SRS?
it was Flashcards Plus or something for iOS. It was many years ago
Yeah,
now.
because people don't know this, but like Anki's been around since like 2006, but it was not always the preeminent SRS. You know, if you go
No.
back a decade ago, well, more than a decade at this point. If you go back, 15 years or whatever, there was like Nimnosine. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Memrise?
Nimnosine. No, no, not
Oh.
Memrise, but like Nimnosine or whatever, which was a very early sort
Oh.
of
Mm-hmm.
pre-Anki type
Mm-hmm.
SRS that used SM2, and then there's
Oh, okay.
obviously
Right. Yeah.
Anki. There were SRS apps that turned PowerPoint files into decks of cards. It was the
Really?
wild west of SRS back then. Katsumoto eventually had its own SRS.
Yeah, Silver
Um,
Spoon, wasn't it?
no, Silver Spoon was his like email course, but he had
Oh.
Surusu, I think, which
Oh,
was
I
like,
think I remember something about it at the website, and I was reading all these things. I've actually read so many AJAT articles, and I was just like, ended up just reading them kind of for theater because I was like, okay, well, I can kind of do something like this, but like making all these cards and doing all this stuff like that, it just got really overwhelming.
yeah,
So
it's
I
trippy to use older. Back in the day, Anki was not. It was even more inconvenient to use. Now, when you download an Anki deck, it's .apkg, and it unpacks everything perfectly. But it used to be something called a .anki, a .anki, I
uh-huh.
think, and
I think I
like
remember something like that.
it
Yeah.
didn't have like the media and everything packed in, so you would have to like manually move media into like your Anki folder, and like
Oh, I
it
think I
was
remember something like
really
that.
clunky. Yeah, the old days of
Wild,
Anki.
wild. Yeah. So, like, I got introduced by immersion, I guess, with AJAT, and I was like, "Oh, this is super cool." But at the same time, in the back of my brain, it was like, "This is so intimidating," and I never got really into that. But I ended up making a decision to say, "Okay, I like video games. All my video games are going to be in Japanese from here on out." And I had bought some Japanese games before. So I ended up basically doing free flow immersion with like no lookups for years before I ever started Refold because every single one of my games was in Japanese. Um, but throughout this period, there was just a lot of period, like the reverse of it, like this weird thing of like Dunning Kruger on the streets and then like imposter syndrome in the sheets. Like,
I love
I
that.
was like around other people, I was like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. And then like by myself, I was like, no, I really don't. Or like I don't know what to do next, or I don't know where to go forward. Or and then like thinking I was doing stuff and like it was very, very confusing. And like I said, I was not as involved at this time. So but I ended up basically doing like this free flow immersion stuff. So fast forward, and I like rage quit studying for the Japanese for the JLPT N1. And this is after, I kid you not, I had like 4 months ago, for like 4 or 5 months ago prior to that, I was doing 100 cards a day, 100 new cards a day. And like I had 600 or 700 reviews, and my reviews were taking like 2.5 hours.
Wow.
Um, so this was RTK cards, RTK Volume 1, RTK Volume 2. And then I had this idea, which now that I've been through the refold process a little more, actually doesn't make that much. It actually isn't that nonsense, but it was nonsense the way I did it, where I figured out how to program and make a flashcard that represented a page of these Japanese books that I bought, and I would just say, "Go read this page." And so I had these I had this like book on how you write for business in Japanese, written in this manga style. I had this Sword World tabletop RPG book, and I had all this these flashcards telling me to go read these pages, including my JLPT books. But problem was that the reviews stacked up so high that I was just like skimming the pages and not getting anything. I wasn't actually like sitting and reading. I wonder if I return to that now or something like that now, like it would be better now that I actually know more about reading and I could actually sit down to read. But I essentially was doing all this stuff. I was thinking, okay, I'm not really there on the
Did you
JLPT.
come onto that yourself, or did you read like
No,
something
I made
from?
that up myself.
Okay, because
I was like, hey, I want to start reading.
Peter
Hmm.
Wozniak, the guy who
Hmm.
made Super Memo, is a
Okay.
big fan of something called incremental reading, where he
Oh no, I
essentially
no, I remember I had actually. Oh no, I take that back. I had read about incremental reading. I take that back. I'd read about
and
incremental
you
reading.
made sort of a crude version of that.
Yes, made set of a
Okay.
crude version of that. But was tying it all with the JLPT and was thinking, oh, the JLPT is my measure of fluency. It's not. Uh, and essentially I rage quit this studying for the JLPT because I had taken a practice test in January of the year before I started Refold. and gotten a particular score. And then at the end of the year, I took the practice test again, and my score had not changed. Like, it literally had not gotten any better. So I'm like, okay, this clearly isn't working. And I had stumbled upon Matt. I don't know how YouTube algorithm is YouTube algorithm, but I stumbled upon Matt and then said that, oh, he's doing Refold. And then I went and read the guide and I joined the Discord server. And I joined the Discord server. And the reason this is all relevant is that I joined the Discord at stage 2B. Because when reading the guide, I was like, oh, maybe 2B is actually where I am, despite the number of years I've engaged with the language up until
Which would
this
have been
point.
17 years at that point.
Yes, it was 17 years. Needless to say, that was very interesting. That was very interesting because there was lots of confused users going, wait, what? You've been doing this how long and you're 2B? I'm like, well, I think that's where I am because I haven't read any novels yet. I haven't read any stuff. Because like during this period, I was thinking, oh, I'm not ready to watch YouTube videos. I'm not fluent yet. Oh, I'm not ready to read novels yet. I'm not fluent. And that's like the complete opposite of how we approach things. Because it's like you're not going to get better at reading novels if you don't read novels. You're not going to get any better at watching YouTube videos if you don't watch a YouTube video. So I was artificially hamstringing myself this entire time thinking I wasn't ready to do something. And that was really a limiting belief that really kept me back. But getting into the server and starting being, I was like, okay, so I'm 2B. Had lots of conversations with fellow users. And Alice, I want to give her a shout out because I really appreciated my conversations with her. She was like saying, okay, no, like let's look at the actual criteria here. Like, where are you watching Slice of Life? Are you pretty comfortable understanding it? I'm like, okay, yes. And then I remember like, okay, well, I've actually done some things. Like I rented an apartment in Japan, and I didn't do that with English, and I can go into a room of Japanese people and for the most part introduce myself and have a decent conversation. This was about like a year ago. So then she's like, well, no, you're not 2B, you're stage 3. So I'm like, okay, so I'm in stage 3. And then I didn't know where I was after that. I just had this really random immersion schedule. Like, oh, just get it in, just try to do things. Was really directionless on that. But we had eventually kind of agreed that, like, okay, Ryan, you're stage 3. But then because my journey was so varied, even when I got to coaching, on the first like evaluation call, right, Vanessa and Ethan were looking at me like, we don't actually know where you are. So it was a really weird thing, an interesting thing. So we decided, okay, well, you're just 3C, and we're going to focus on working you through first. There was some more reading based input, then listening input, and then eventually transitioning more towards comfortable output than an evaluation to get to stage 4. That was kind of a long-winded answer, but I hope that actually helped.
That did.
So
So
when did you have that moment with Ethan where he said you were stage 4?
So there was a little bit of rumblings the second to last coaching session I had of like, okay, Ryan, you're probably practically already there if you're capable of having these conversations. But I wanted a little bit more proof, so I scheduled some sessions with a Hello Talk tutor, and a little bit more expensive than italki, so I might recommend italki a little bit more. But I scheduled some sections with the italki tutor, with the Hello Talk tutor. And just told her to go through various topics. And I noticed that I'm able to comfortably talk about this. I'm able to have these conversations. And some things that Vanessa and Ethan were sharing about the transition from stage 3 to stage 4 really helped me. I had always assumed that, vocabulary knowledge, domain knowledge is really what differentiates you. And it's like that's not exactly true for the transition from stage 3 to stage 4, because the domain is daily conversation. The domain is not, do you know this specific thing about this specific thing that you're happening to talk about. Like if you don't know the word for hot sauce and you happen to talk about spicy foods, does that mean you're not stage 4? No, that means you just haven't immersed in Japanese hot wings type videos, and that's separate from
And what is
daily
hot sauce in
conversation.
Japanese?
I actually don't know. Hot sauce,
All
probably.
right. Chose an actual example.
When in doubt, just katakana-fy it.
That's pretty much what
Processing.
I would get. There's things like karakuchi you'd say for things that are spicy, right? Um, you'd see that on boxes and things like that. But like for actual hot sauce like Tabasco, I actually am willing to bet it would be hotto sauce. I'm actually willing to bet that that's what it would be. Um, so I did this kind of review process of what
I'm going to cut you off, and I
mhm,
know why you felt that way.
mhm,
Because the original Refold guide was written in a large part by Matt, who has a
mhm,
bit of sort of an absolutist take on things.
mhm,
And if you only read the guide, it does come off that you need to understand every single word, right?
mhm,
If
mhm,
I say the word, my example is usually lignite or lignite. I've never actually heard the word. It's a type of coal,
mhm,
brown coal. And
mhm,
I've seen that word 2 times. It used to be 1 time. I saw it 1 time reading an article about minerals with a
mhm,
student when I used to work at an eikaiwa.
mhm.
I saw it again recently, reading about, I don't know, burial practices in ancient Germany or something, just the other day. Um,
Ah,
and the first time I saw that word, I didn't know what it meant, but I'm a native English speaker. I speak English just fine. But in that very moment, I did not have level 5 comprehension of the domain, which is minerals, right? But I don't study minerals. I'm not a
right,
mineralogist or anything. So uh, we're behind in updating the roadmap. I do want to update it very soon, but other things have taken priority. But I totally understand why you and other people come in with this black or white. You need to have
right.
you need to know the word for hot sauce. No, you don't. You can talk about sauce that is hot. You can talk around it.
Yeah, and that's what I've noticed that I can do, and that's what through the coaching with Vanessa and Ethan, I was able to understand that. Oh wait, like that's still communicating. That's still daily conversation. That's still fine. Um, so then after that period, we had was I think it might have been the last call that we had where it was like, you know, Ryan, you're stage 4, go for it. And what really helped also is like the prior podcast, right? We've talked about you're each on your own journey, right? Like if and it's not good to compare yourself. Like if I compare myself to other Japanese learners, right, in the Japanese server, there's people that have read like 200 light novels. Like I hadn't read any until like earlier this year or earlier the year before. Uh, like people read 5 or 6 novels. Like I hadn't read any until this past year. Although as a fun little note, my first novel in Japanese that I read that was not a light novel was San Tai,
Oh, three
which
body problem.
it was in
That is a
fact a
famous
body problem.
Chinese sci-fi novel.
That's on my
Hmm.
list of books to read. I have so many books on my list to read. It's,
I've heard so
a
much
bit
about it.
terrifying,
I
It's
but
just
a
I've
I
it's
just
heard
kind of have
good.
to read
nothing.
it.
No, it's got a
We need to have a
donghua now.
podcast
It's got a Chinese
totally.
animation. It's not
Does it?
2D. It's 3D. Um,
Okay,
and
okay.
actually, it's people are gonna hate. I
Santai
think it's
has an
actually
animation.
it does. It does have. It's currently like being released right now. Um, I'm friends with
Oh.
a lot of people in the community, and I humored a friend of mine who wanted to watch it and
Hmm.
had no one to watch it with, even though I've put Mandarin on the shelf. And as of like last week, I think they only had 2 episodes out, but it
Okay.
currently
Where is it
has.
streaming?
I think it's streaming on Bilibili. It's a Chinese
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
streaming
then
site.
that's where I would guess.
Yeah, and it's a 3D animation, a 3D donghua. I think it's actually kind of ugly. I'll be honest, it's not the prettiest animation. Chinese animation is really hit or miss, but
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
cool that it's got a donghua now. It's got an animation. So just throwing it
Oh,
out
that's
there.
fun.
One day it'll be dubbed in Japanese, English, or
Oh,
subtitled,
oh,
and
that
you
at
guys
that
can have
point
a crack.
I might
Call me
actually be
when
able to
it's in
watch it in the original.
Spanish.
That point, I might actually be able to watch it in the original. Though it was really interesting reading Sandai, Volume 1 and 2, in Japanese because it's originally Chinese, so the names are in Chinese. So the names are in Chinese. They've got katakana like operations of like a katakana, furigana for those, but then the rest of it's Japanese. So that was a really interesting experience. But I mean this to say that, like, okay, I'm on my own journey, and I'm not comparing and it's not good for me to compare myself to anybody, because my journey is my own.
True.
And we're all on the train. We're all on being pulled by the engine of ascension, our engine of ascension together. And that's fine. So kind of coaching really helped, kind of really, in a way, like lower the expectations and strip away kind of the accretions of, you have to have done this and you have to have done that and you have to have done this and you have to have clocked this and you have to clock that. Like, I'll say this, yeah, hey, I'm a stage 4, but I don't remember every single reading of every single kanji. There's plenty of others in the community that know that far better. I'll be working on that, continuing to work on that.
Yeah.
But I'm here. I'm a stage 4, and I'm happy to say that, and I'm happy to keep working on that. So really kind of that releasing, as it were, of
Oh,
this
actually, Ryan, I
incredibly
think this
high
is a
bar.
great moral to wrap us up.
I was just
Mhm.
going to say, this is such a awesome point to end this podcast. A really positive note where, for me, I just, I didn't say much this episode, but I was really just absorbed by your story. And I haven't been learning Spanish nearly as long as you've been learning Japanese, but a lot of what you've said has really resonated with me and
Really glad to hear
my,
that.
yeah, history learning Spanish. And I'm like, oh man, I should do coaching. But I'm here with Freefold.
The
But yeah,
Refold
thank you.
podcasts are like parables. They always have a
Yeah.
lesson to learn. So if
I
we
feel like I don't even
Bree,
need to sum it up. He just did it.
well, so actually,
Okay.
I'm gonna challenge you to sum it up, because
No.
condense it,
Okay.
condense it, and
Okay.
it's sort of like putting a postscript at the end of an email for
Okay.
people
I'll
who
do my
skim,
best. I'll do my best for tradition, for
or
tradition's sake.
tradition,
For
as foretold.
tradition, as foretold. It seems like the moral, which seems like the wrong word for what we do. But anyway, the summation of this episode is everyone's on their own journey. If you make progress and if you do the work, you are powering your own engine of ascension, right? Did I get it right? And
The engine of
you will see
ascension carries you
results.
forward as a result of your work. So
Yes, absolutely.
it it's if I can just really crystallize everything here, if I
Yes,
may, if
please.
I just may,
Go for it. I'm here for it.
that your progress in any skill
Mhm.
comes down to simply showing up and doing the practice. Nothing more,
Preach.
nothing less. And distraction
Preach.
and confusion about, like, oh, doing this thing and oh, doing that thing and oh, doing this thing over there keeps you from that goal. It is much better to pick something for a while, something that, coming from coaching, like, really helped
Mhm.
me, was like, think about 12-week sprints, and then you can actually go farther. And that consistency actually moves things forward. And then the second thing, like I was saying,
Mhm.
is that you are your own person. You are on your own journey, and it will distract you from being able to continue to execute, which is what you need, by comparing yourself to others. That's what I
George, I
think.
can't sum that up. That's a perfect summation. I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to
That's
copy,
fine.
control C, control V. Exactly. Exactly what he said. But anyway, thank you so much, Ryan, Nerdy Dude, for joining us this week. It was a pleasure listening to you talk about your experiences learning Japanese and ascending to level 4. And for everyone who was listening to this week's episode of the Refold Roundtable podcast, thank you so much for tuning in. If you are here for the live premiere, please make sure to join us for the after party immediately after the podcast in the Refold Discord. If you love this episode and want to hear more, you can listen to past episodes on YouTube and Spotify. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to give us a like and leave a comment down below. We would love to hear from you. We read all your comments. And if you would like to suggest a topic for a future episode, we'd also love to hear from you. You can do that in the Refold Discord. Do not forget. You just added to my notes. Nerdydude added, and I'm going to say this just for you. It's in the notes. Do not forget to bestow upon everyone endless appropriate hugs. That is from Ryan. So, endless appropriate hugs, I guess, for everyone. And links to everything is in the channel description, the video description of this episode, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of the Refold Podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening and maybe even learned something new. Projects, events, and content like this podcast are only possible thanks to our generous patrons. If you liked this and want to see more similar projects, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Visit community.refold.la/Patreon-benefits to learn more.